Hello, you're watching New Vision TV News. I am Rothina Seje. We take a look at the headlines first. Our headlines today: in the news around Uganda, Health Minister immunizes daughter to assure the public the vaccine is safe. And in the news around East Africa, more than half of the population in Southeast Sudan is struggling to have enough to eat, an aid agency said Wednesday. In our daily pile of Africa stories, here is why a tortoise can live up to 100 years. These and more stories in our full bulletin. I'm glad you're watching New Vision TV News. We start off with the news around Uganda. Health Minister Dr. Jane Ruth Acheng made an appearance at Green Hill Academy in Kampala earlier today to have her daughter, who studies there, immunized. The minister first interacted with the pupils and later presented her daughter Michelle for immunization against measles rubella. Acheng later put a sticker on her face to show bravery of Michelle and also assure the public the vaccine is safe and effective. Among the immunized children at the school were the ministers, nieces and nephews. The mass immunization campaign against measles, rubella and polio that started yesterday will go on until October the 20th. Acheng is now appealing to all parents to have their children vaccinated.
Again, my appeal to parents, and especially those in the international schools, whether your child was vaccinated out of the country, this is a great opportunity for you to support all the children in Uganda develop herd immunity. When our coverage is high, 95%, 97%, it is good. So rather than let your child be the one to start an outbreak in those schools, please come out and vaccinate your children.
Moving on, police has impounded bodas that are not roadworthy and those whose riders are found without proper documentation. Those not following the proper road regulations are also arrested. The operation took place along Entebbe Road. The boda riders were not pleased.
Police zaweddewo baagala zaakawunga zebanoonya lwaki n'emitwalo nkaaga ogifuna oya mu budde boda gy'ovuga ya mugagga kino kitandibadde bwekitino.
However, from the borders, now police spokesperson Fred Enanga has rubbished allegations that he used his position to back his father in a 4-square-mile land dispute in a park district. Enanga dismissed as untrue claims that he orchestrated the jailing of relatives who claimed that Enanga's father grabbed the Lango clan land. Enanga's father, George Echonga, is a retired senior police officer. Testifying yesterday at the Land Probe Commission public hearing in Kampala, Enanga said the relatives who had testified were arrested over criminality-related cases. Prior lead counsel Ebert Biencha stated that several complaints had accused Enanga of using police facilities and the court system to settle scores. In response, Enanga painted his accusers as persons who lied conveniently to win sympathy, yet they had self-inflicted wounds. However, from news around Uganda, we move on to news making headlines around the East African region. We start from Kenya, where Kenya opened a $1.5 billion Chinese-built railway linking Nairobi to Naivasha on Wednesday, despite delays in building an industrial park in the Rift Valley town to encourage freight. The extension link to another Chinese-funded and built $3.2 billion line between the port of Mombasa and Nairobi that opened in 2017 2017, but is so far underutilized for cargo services. Upgrading Kenyan railways has been part of Beijing's One Belt, One Road initiative, multi-billion-dollar infrastructure projects aimed at improving land and maritime trade routes between China and Europe, Asia and Africa. News in Southeast Sudan. More than half of the population in Southeast Sudan is struggling to have enough to eat, an aid agency said on Wednesday. In a statement issued to mark World Food Day, the International Committee of the Red Cross said while food insecurity has improved slightly since the last period last year, millions of South Sudanese are still depending on food aid for survival. World Food Day is celebrated every October the 16th to honor the date when the United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization started in 1945. Closing off news around East Africa is a story from Tanzania, where Tanzania could soon get its own musician turned MP, but unlike Uganda's Bobby Wine, Tanzania's Harmonize backs the government. President John Magufuli has just endorsed the musician, whose real name is Rajab Abdul, for a run at a seat in parliament next year. The president's support comes as his government continues to ban songs deemed sexually suggestive by some other artists. Moving on is news around the world. We begin from the continent. In Zimbabwe, the price of bread shot up 60% overnight in Zimbabwe in the latest blow for a population already struggling with spiraling living costs. Zimbabweans can barely keep pace with the price rises that have reckoned fears of hyperinflation, which reached 500 billion% a decade ago and forced the country to trash its own currency. Already, many families live on one meal a day, with a Southern African country in the group of a major downturn that has provoked biting shortages of basics such as fuel and medicine. Bakers said they were forced to hike their prices due to the rising production costs. In Morocco, Moroccan journalist Jahara Roissouni, who was sentenced to 1 year in jail for an illegal abortion and sexual relations outside marriage, walked free on Wednesday shortly after being granted a royal pardon in a case that had provoked a storm of protests from rights groups. The Justice Ministry said the 28-year-old woman was released on a pardon issued by King Mohammed VI. Roissouni was sentenced on September 30th, along with her Sudanese fiancé, a gynecologist, and a medical assistant, whose convictions were also overturned, an official said. In Sudan, Sudan announced a permanent ceasefire in a country's war zones, even as a key rebel group threatened to pull out of peace talks, accusing government forces of bombing its territory. Juba has been hosting talks between new Prime Minister Abdallah Hamdok's government and delegates from two umbrella groups of rebels who fought now ousted President Omar al-Bashir's forces in Darfur, Blue Nile, and South Kordofan states. The talks were launched on Monday, but the rebel Sudan People's Liberation Movement North told journalists it would pull out unless the government withdrew from an area in the Nuba Mountains. of the continent. In the United Kingdom, Britain and the European Union reached a new divorce deal Thursday that could allow Brexit on October 31st, but faced immediate opposition among MPs in London who could still block it. The deal was still just hours before the summit of EU leaders that is expected to endorse the text, but it must pass the British Parliament when it meets on Saturday. British Prime Minister Boris Johnson, who has taxed his premiership on leaving the EU at the end of the month, said he had secured a great new deal that takes back control. European Commission Chief Jean-Claude Juncker said it is a fair and balanced agreement for the EU and the UK, and it is testament to our commitment to find solutions. The deal is a victory for Johnson, who took office in July, promising to end Britain's membership out of the European bloc in line with the results of 2016 referendum. He vowed to renegotiate a previous text that MPs rejected 3 times, or take Britain out of the EU with no deal on October 31st, but it could quickly turn to defeat if the House of Commons refuses to endorse the deal when it meets for a special sitting on. Ending news around the world is a story from Russia. President Vladimir Putin hosts dozens of African leaders next week as Russia seeks to reset its influence on the continent and beyond. The heads of some 35 African countries are expected for the first Africa-Russia summit in the Black Sea resort of Sochi next Wednesday and Thursday. Putin said the summit is a chance to revive Soviet-era relationships and build new alliances, bolstering Moscow's global clout in the face of confrontation with the West. That is it for news around the world. We now take a short break, but when we come back, we'll take a look at news in business.